back to another episode of RoboReplay. Today we're going to be going over a match from what some people regard as one of the best defensive tank performances of all time, and trying to analyze how tank defense works, what are some of tank's weaknesses at Drivetrain, and could tank be a viable option in the future for FRC games. For some context about this match, we have Alliance 4 and Alliance 1 on the Curie Field here in 2019 at the Detroit World Championship. Every single robot here is a tank robot, but they are also ridiculously high-powered teams in this match. So, in 2019, 2056, and 1114 were seen as the equivalent of 254 and 2056 in 2023, as both of them were the two best scoring robots in the world coming to the event, and people kind of just assumed that they would make a clean sweep of their division and win Einsteins. However, Alliance 4 is made up of 195 and 3538, both of whom were and still are powerhouses from the New England and Michigan district respectively. So although the predictors might have been favoring the Canadian teams, Alliance 4 was no joke. What we are going to pay attention to here is 1073, who put up what some people regard as one of the best defensive performances of all time, similar to 321 of this year, 2024. So with that context out of the way, let's get into this match. We are going to be skipping past the sandstorm or auto period here, and the only main thing to note from this period is that both teams are sitting in an even 15-15 score in auto, so Teleup and Endgame are going to be the main deciders of this match. As Teleup begins, something I do want to point out that was very helpful for defense every year, not just 2019, is the bumper cutouts that 1073 has. What these bumper cutouts allow you to do is force leverage on your opponent, as if you can snatch their bumper corner into your cutout, then you can turn them by rotating and ruin their scoring. You can see here that 1114 is going to get flung off of 1073 here as they wiggle their way out of the bumper cutout as they get unjammed from the leverage. I do want to note that when you are playing against someone with a bumper cutout, it's a lot easier to use that leverage to your advantage when there is a full bumper all around, as you can get yourself into this type of position where it's very easy to get a lock on the opponent and just not able to allow them to leave. Now we're going to see exactly why tank defense works so well in this game, as at 122 seconds left, 1073 is just going to completely section off 1114 from going back and collecting a gate piece to score. The only reason 1114 is going to end up being able to get out of here is because 1073 overplays this a bit and flies upwards a little bit too far, giving 1114 the space to exit. So something I do want to note here is that even if 1114 was a swerve drive, in this interaction it wouldn't have mattered because the choke point here is so powerful and so cramped that 1073 doesn't need to back up, meaning they don't need the rotation that swerve provides for their defense. Swerve is necessary for defense in games where the choke point is either too large to cover with one movement forwards and backwards, or where there are multiple choke points that need to be covered off, such as in 2024. In 2019, we only saw one choke point, and it was very doable to just block it moving forwards and backwards, leading to tank defense being very viable, and just very good in general. Now, 1114 is going to try to come back in, and this is where the swerve would have been very helpful, as 1073 is playing quite far up from the choke point with no way to fall back into it easily, as they can't just shift backwards using swerve. The positioning here from 1073 is quite smart though, as they're using their bumper cutout to deny the points from being scored on the front side of the rocket here, and are angled so that if they need to fall back, they can drive themselves backwards, and this ends up happening, and they do end up falling back. And at 98 seconds here, we do see the ridiculous strength of the 1073 drive base, which apparently has pushed both a person and one of the 2017 robots at the same time, and won, just showing how much power that drivetrain truly has. And we're going to see them bully 1114 with their strength. 1114 is unable to move upwards or downwards due to the friction of this not even pin, it's just the sheer force that 1073 has. And 1073 makes a great maneuver to get their bumper cutout into 1114 again after they're able to leave and get yet another pin on 1114. 1073 here makes magic by manipulating the choke points again by forcing 1114 out of their own scoring zone with some beautiful driving and very smart decisions using their bumper cutouts. I do want to talk about tank drive, so I'm going to pause here at 68 seconds and look at 195 here, who have their own way of figuring out the rotational problem that tanks gives you. And by making their mechanism on a swivel, so that instead of having their rotational capability be on their drivetrain, they move it to their mechanism, that allows their scoring to be extremely improved. And if we ever see tank be used by a team more than 971 at top level, I think the only way for it to be possible is for us to see robots like 195 here, where in a game where there's lanes for robots to drive in, where scoring is done on the side of robot instead of the front like 2023, and it requires traversing left and right, and scoring goes across the field in a pick and place game, so it would allow for tank teams who want to run tank to get the rotation aspect of the game through their mechanism while not giving up that much in their drive rotation, because they already have their mechanism rotating, so you don't really need two things rotating if you already have one rotating. I do think that Swerve is going to continue to stay meta though because of how much it is advanced technologically, but I would not be surprised to see a mini resurgence in Tank Drive if Rescape ends up being a game that checks these boxes. Now, back to the game, we're going to see 1073 do the same strategy of blocking off the choke point, but this time they're going to play around the rocket. As now that they've proven they can bully 1114 off scoring by shoving them, they're willing to play in a little bit of a weird angle and let 1114 into the scoring area as they think they can just push 1114 all the way to the other side of the field. So 1073 is going to do a great job in flipping themselves around to have their bumper cut out always against 1114 when they want to try to push them, and flipping themselves sideways to have their full bumper against 1114 when they want to block them using the choke point, which again is some masterful driving coming out from the 1073 side. At 35 seconds here, we do see 1073 play quite far up, and instead of being able to make it back down, they do end up getting punished, as it looks like they're conflicted between defending a potential 2056 climb as endgame just started, and continuing to stop 1114 from scoring, which ends up leading to them doing neither option, and just allowing 1114 to score another game piece here, which is a little bit of a mistake. So we do see 1073 do some great endgame blocking here, even though they do let 1114 score another game piece, and they're going to end up even descoring or forcing 1114 to descore a hatch panel that they scored before leaving to go do their climb. And this hatch panel is going to end up mattering a lot, as this game is going to end up being tied 95 to 95 at the end, and tiebreaker is going to win 1073's match. So that descored hatch panel is quite literally won them the game. So they held 1114 in the end of this game to 3 game pieces on a team that scored on average 9 tele-op game pieces per match per StatBotics, and just the match before this scored 7 game pieces against fully hard defense on 1114. So they ended up cutting 1114 scoring by at least a half of what it normally would have been against any other defender, and these defenders at Worlds are no joke, and by a third if they just let 1114 run freely. So for some context and try to compare this with other historical defensive performances, this would be like if a team's defense in 2024 kept 1323 to 7 cycles, and 321 at their peak kept 1323 to 7 cycles in one of their matches, which shows how their defensive performances compare with another. The similar example would be like if you kept 1678 in 2023 to about 16 tele-op points combined if we use StatBotics data again, and this is why some people are calling this one of the best defensive runs of all time and putting 321 up next to this as a comparison. So at the end of all of this, the Blue Alliance is going to end up taking this game, as I said before, due to tiebreakers, and they would end up taking the series in 3 against one of the most insane alliances that we've seen. Again, I compared it to 254 and 2056 and 2023. I think that's a very fair comparison to make, and this Canadian alliance would be taken down and have their chances at an Einstein run cut short due to the 1073, 195, and RoboJackets alliance here. And this alliance 4, would end up winning the entire division and make a run through Einsteins, which ended up keeping them as a third alliance at Einsteins, and the only reason they weren't able to get to the second alliance and a chance for the world title was due to a single misclimb in the endgame. So, all in all, I think this game in general was really the peak of what we'll see from Tank as a class, from 195 having their little swivel mechanism that allowed them to score at a pretty great pace, even though they did end up breaking down at the end. I did point out the drivetrain issues at the end there. And the 1073 defense was incredible. Main things to look out for next year that we can learn from this performance is, for one, bumper cutouts. Those to lock down 1114, having their bumper cut out, even go against 1114's corner, completely shut them down. Even if next year maybe we won't see as many robots with bumper cutouts, even putting the bumper cutout into a corner of a robot will still net you an insane amount of value just from being able to try to manipulate people, as we saw from 1073 do it to 1114. Another thing to look out for, if we are going to see Tank come again in defense or in offense even, as like something meta, then I think the only way that's going to happen is with a game where you can score on the side of your drivetrain and tank doesn't have to actively turn, as the tank turning is the main reason why people don't pick it, because of how hard it is to turn and to rotate yourself. So I said 2023 as an example before. The main reason that 2023 was really bad for tank was because we were scoring the opposite way that tank liked. So what tank likes is when you go from moving from one direction to the other direction and you're scoring parallel to where you're moving. In 2023 you were scoring perpendicular, so that meant that you had to turn yourself all weird and then you had to reach forward. It was very hard to do unless you were a team like 971, who obviously has incredible engineering skill and made a solution for that game with tank, and an incredible driver as well to comp that off with. So my opinion, if we're going to see tank come back, it's going to be in a game like 2019 where we do have some really easy choke points to defend, and where even with the 4 motor rule that we now have, tank can still pack a lot of power in those 6, 8, 10 wheels, however many wheels you're going to use. So if we're going to see tank come back for defense, it's going to be in a game where there's really easy choke points to manipulate, and it'll give you that option to just shove around teams that are bigger than you, similar to how 321 did with swerve modules. And maybe we'll see swerve defense just become the new tank defense because of how powerful it's become, but that's something that we'll just have to see later. This was RoboReplay. Have a lovely day, and thank you for watching.